Yeah, I'd agree with Vince. It's a bit of a cliche. There's more that unites us than separates us, really. We're not the enemy. We have a legislative responsibility, and we are servants of the legislation. So what we've managed to do through the Ministry for Regulation Review is actually get some fundamental change to the legislation that will allow both Vincent and my organisations to implement those. But again, I echo Vince's sentiment. I wrote to many of you asking, what is the products? Where would you like us to focus? Can we rearrange our pathways around those? The other thing I'd say is that many of you have parents offshore. I worked for Telstra for 8 to 9 years. Telstra's a massive international company. Telstra and Telstra Care fought for 20 years to get regulatory change and didn't really till the very last moment. And I know what it's like, trying to get money, capital and investment into the country. And at the end of the day, New Zealand was just too small for Telstra, which was its decision. So making sure we can find ways to encourage and incentivise those very large organisations. I understand the challenges in that and how easy it is for things to be misunderstood, either from political statements or from regulator statements or whatever that may be. And I just spend a lot of my time going back to Australia trying to reinterpret what was said and what people thought was said here. So we need to work together, particularly on substances that you think are real game changers, because we're prepared, like Vince, to reprioritise and really think about how we can bring them through. We've implemented a whole new team to do that. There's 11 new staff coming into the organisation. We've done that after taking 48 roles out of the organisation. And just last week, we've grabbed 2 more ecotoxicologists, one from Italy, well, we're in the process of, I think, and one from the States. So the engine room of the EPA, the ecotoxicologists, are now well and truly staffed, where we were very limited before. So we're doing everything possible, but it takes time for people to come up to speed, and we hope to get them up to speed pretty quickly.
Just to reinforce, yeah, the answer is yes, for the reasons in particular that Allan's laid out. But also, I just think to maybe the point I made at the beginning, like there is a real sense of political urgency around this, and ministers certainly have moved this review process through very quickly in order to generate the recommendations. Now we're at a point where we need to land the legislation, and your input into the legislation, is this going to work? Is this going to enable the kind of outcomes that we're after? It's really important. Then we need to execute on the operational side, and a lot of that's in the hands of Allan and Vince and their teams, and we've got to support them with that. And so probably 2 years away from now, there'll be an opportunity to take stock. Have we made the difference that we anticipated? If not, what further is required to unblock things and to free up the system? But I think we've set things up hopefully to succeed, and it's a case of delivering now.
Oh, thank you. We're now going to move to questions, and out of respect for our panellists, may I ask that you give your name and company so that they know where the question is coming from. Good to see some hands up.
Thanks, Katherine.
G'day, it's Nick here from Pacific Vet Limited. Just want to quickly thank the panellists for being here today and offering up some really good positives, which is encouraging. As a registrant of veterinary vaccines, though, I feel like it's important to give our perspective on what we're seeing on the ground. And while the recommendations that have been adopted are really encouraging, we're still yet to see those. We're really hopeful, but I guess it's been a long process and reasonably impatient to see progress. And I guess if I talk to a specific area of interest to us, it could be harmonisation. And as a business, our regulatory resources are completely tied up dealing with and submitting variations for often small manufacturing changes that have been approved by large respected overseas regulators, and that doesn't seem to add a lot of value to the process from our perspective. And what it also does is it means that it puts at risk our ability to release products that come in because we're still working through those variations, and it might not meet the current specifications or registration package. So a real challenge. And then the other opportunity cost for that is we've got no resource left to bring new products to market. So a real opportunity cost there for us as a business. And maybe that's our unique perspective, but it might just be really interesting to get a bit of an indication from the audience here. Can I get a show of hands for any other registrants in the room that have seen an improvement since the regulatory review changes have been adopted? So,
have you got a question?
Yes, I'll get to my question. Yep. So
the panel.
Yep. Look, obviously, Vince, it's a big ship to steer, and as I say, we're really hopeful in its early days. But how do you think you can support the team at ACVM to adjust their risk settings and empower them to be more accepting, particularly of minor manufacturing changes, already accepted by overseas regulators?
Thanks for the question. This is certainly an area that I think we all agree those minor manufacturing changes, particularly if they've been approved elsewhere, should be able to be taken out to the system and moved much, much faster, or almost taken through. So it is an obvious area of focus. I mean, they don't normally take a lot of time, but if you're experiencing them as taking time, then we will want to focus on them. So it has been identified both by our team and also through the review as an obvious area to focus on. So I know the team are focusing on it. You asked what we can do to help shift the risk view. That's a careful balancing act, because it's a small team actually. You're talking about sort of 20 or so people, most of whom are just doing the work. And I've got to be careful with the how do you direct people? Because people will do what you tell them to do. So at the end of the day, they have a framework to work through, and I think the best way that I can make a difference is actually shift that framework. The last thing I need, and I think the industry needs, is an individual deciding to make a personal decision and pass something through when the framework would suggest not to. I mean, that's one thing that hasn't happened, and if that does happen and we get a really bad outcome, and we talk about the whole economy, so it's important that we leave those people free to get on and do their job, and we'll work on the framework.
I'll stand up so everyone else can see me. Hi, I'm Mel Walker from Zespri. Many New Zealand businesses obviously rely heavily on our ability to innovate. And I have spoken personally with researchers from Crown Institutes about their pretty immense frustration at our trial approval process. In the most recent EPA report, we can see actually quite a significant drop in those trial applications, possibly suggesting that that balance isn't right. If an industry proposed group standard isn't acceptable, what is the best fix for that?
I don't know why they've dropped, but I can tell you there is no queue in the trial or containment area. A group standard's not possible legally, nor is it necessary at the moment. I don't think we've just got a few sitting there that's going through. Chris, Lauren, 5 or 4. Chris and Lauren, I'd invite you to talk to, put huge amounts of effort about 2 years ago to make sure containment applications move fast. And they do now. They're probably the fastest moving pathway we've got. So I'm not sure why trial applications aren't coming through, but we'd welcome more, and we'll put them through.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to thank APHANZ for putting this panel in front of us to get that first-hand information on the progress that has been made in this space, regulatory review, which is quite a big beast. And I totally agree with the comment that Allan and Vince made around the regulators have to work within that legislation boundaries. There's only so much you can do. And this morning, so Bill English made a comment around that New Zealand generally New Zealand prefers safety over risk, and this is something what you mentioned earlier as well, Vince, in the comment. And he mentioned that we've got over-precautionary approach when it comes to releasing some of those chemicals, new molecules. My question is that with this regulatory review, do you see that dial shifting slightly? And also kind of understanding the comment made around people's perception. Different people have different perception around risk. So keeping that into account, do you see that whether that dial is going to shift slightly towards a more favorable position?
What was interesting in the, I think Bill's right. I mean, regulators are conservative. If they're not regulators. That's what we are. And that's a natural position we fall into. And safety, for us at the EPA, human health and environment is our mission, balanced by clearly helping economic growth. The Ministry for Regulations report didn't see any need to make alterations to the references around the precautionary principle, which really is a principle and is only comes into play when there's scientific uncertainty. And I can't think of any decision over the last 5 or maybe even 10 years where the precautionary principle has played a role within the decision making about substances. Where we have scientific uncertainty or where we have gaps, we're bound to seek that, and occasionally that results in applications going in circles while we're trying to fill in those gaps for that. And I guess I come back to Vince's comments about setting risks, and you know, the HASNO team is just scientists, full of scientists, and they are not short of opinions by any means, and their scientific professionalism about where they set risk and controls. And it is quite hard to shift an organisation and do those settings and to do that professionally and in a systematic way. But what I think we've now got when the omnibus amendments are passed is we've got some doors open now to rely on our colleagues, which we didn't have before, both in Australia, Canada, probably, we'll see about the US, and Europe, somewhat selectively, to say, is there enough commonality in the decision that's been made on these? Is the use patterns the same if they are? But also, again, I come back to this temporary pathway. Can we take the risk of giving an immediate approval to something to get it out there so you can utilise it and sell it, and be sure when we come back to look at it, we're fine. One final point, the EPA is an unusual regulator. We don't regulate for today, we regulate for tomorrow. And most of us are scared of waking up in our retirement and finding we made a mistake 5 to 10 years ago, and we've taken out the kiwi or taken something else out. You know, we're regulating for the future, and the decisions we make last a long time. So there is quite a responsibility there.
Down the back.
John Holloway, Syngenta. Thank you, panel. Question is there a way that in New Zealand that the regulators can firewall resources to focus or prioritise risk assessments for new active ingredients? Because between the small market size in New Zealand and the long timelines, it's making it harder and harder for us to put together a viable business case for new AIs in New Zealand. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a fair question. I guess what we've had multiple pressures. I guess what we've focused on initially was to clear the queues of low-risk A and Bs, and we're pretty much getting there. So I think we'll be on track to do about 58 approvals, which will be the biggest we've done for years. But the real one is new actives, what we call CAT-Cs. And we're committed to finding a way in the pathways to try and focus and prioritise on those, but there's trade-offs, right? So And we need to consult with you about those trade-offs, because if we pour resource onto those and one of your colleagues has less, not a cat C in the queue, and that gets put to the back, then we'll hear from them as well. But again, I come back to the fact that for the Hasno team is the biggest team in EPA today. We've poured 11 new people in a time that we were asked to cut costs, and we've managed to do that. We're pouring 2 more ecotoxicologists in. We're trying to meet your needs as fast as we can and still do our jobs in terms of regulatory safety. So Cat C's at the top. We would welcome discussions with you about how do we get early indications that you've got them coming. Does it need to be a Bible, as you say, or can it be more an executive summary? You know, a lot of those discussions are at the scientist level, you know, and sort of outside my skill set as well.
That's all the time we have for questions. As a final question to the panel, what's the one thing that we can do to help you in your work?
I would say keep the pressure on us, really. So, you know, unpleasant though it might be, I just think, yeah, just do your job. You know, we would expect nothing more from you than push hard, but you know, do it in a way that engenders a reasonable response. But we see the Sector Leaders Forum as a good opportunity to keep that engagement going, and we're committed. Look forward to announcing an independent chair shortly. So that that's the thing you can do. But just understand we are actually trying to do our best.
I think just keep bringing the facts, the evidence, the data, relying on the scientists, play the issue, not the person, and walk in each other's shoes.
Yeah, I'd echo Vince. I'd just say keep talking to us directly. It's not so helpful when it's done through the media, so it's more helpful if it's one-on-one and directly to us and to the teams that are involved. It makes everyone feel a bit more valued.
I'd just say do your best to be clear on priorities. It's not easy, in particular for the regulators, to achieve everything at the same time, so that's going to be important.
On behalf of all the members of APHANZ and Business New Zealand and industry, can I thank the 4 panellists? It's been a really excellent discussion. I'm going to finish as I started with a big thank you to you all for your service to our country, because it's not easy work sometimes, and you are constrained by legislation and resourcing, but it's wonderful to have a discussion about priorities, because I think the priorities that you're talking about are exactly the priorities that we in industry are focusing on. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's give a round of applause for our panellists.
Panel. What we will do today, whenever we finish a panel out, we are going to get a photo for posterity. So I will ask everyone just to have a look at the camera and get a nice photo for us.
Thank you.
Magnificent. And look, I really do have to reiterate the thank you to our panel there. I've got to admit, having the regulators come in to a group like this might have felt a little bit like stepping into the lion's den. So I really do want to thank you all for making the time to come here today. And for those of you who are spending the day with us, I'd encourage everyone in the room to go and introduce yourself and talk a little bit around what